Hi, I'm Steve Spencer, a partner at SMB Capital, a proprietary trading firm in New York City where we trade stocks, futures, and options. In today's video, I'm going to answer a question I received on Twitter a few days ago. The question basically is about whether the news that comes out on a stock, the catalyst, matters in terms of how you trade it. So if that topic interests you, stick around. The question I shall read to you that I received on Twitter a few days ago. Stephen, I know you care about news on stocks and relative volume. How you trade a stock that have earnings beat and raised guidance, but still had traded lower all day, like MNK today. Is it really important to know about the news or only important to check the relative volume? It's a really good question. We have an entire process on our desk for choosing stocks that have strong catalysts. And when stocks have strong catalysts, the relative volume goes up. And so the question becomes, once you know that the stock has the strong catalyst, do you need to understand the minutia of the catalyst? And I would say 80% of the time, the answer to that is no. I can give you examples at the end of every week where understanding in detail the catalyst was helpful in building a larger position. But for the most part, what we do is, once we know there's a strong catalyst, we game plan. And based on that game plan, we trade the stock. Now, in the question that Volts Nuts on Twitter asked me was about the stock MNK. MNK, he mentions that they beat earnings, raised guidance, and I think maybe he was a little confused as to the stock beat earnings. Why was it trading down all day? Maybe I should just pay attention to how it trades. Now, if you see the headlines that came out when MNK released earnings, it did have headlines, Q2 earnings beat estimates. But then there's another headline, Q2 earnings beat, generic spinoff is on hold, which means basically they were trying to sell one of their units and apparently they weren't able to sell it. So it's a mixed bag. So just right off the bat, I just want to say to him, to the question, it really wasn't just a case of a stock that beat earnings and maybe you would start to look for an up move, lean to the upside based on the news catalyst. And then the second thing I would say is, as part of my process, and I talked about this in prior videos, and I spend 30 minutes going over this in the 2-hour free workshop we do. It's at tradingworkshop.com. You can check out the link below or the link above. I spend 30 minutes going over the process for stock selection, which is very important. And part of that process is, what does this stock look like in the higher time frame? And in the case of MNK, here's the higher time frame chart. The stock that you selected is basically in a longer term downtrend, and that's because the specialty pharma sector that it's in has been in a multi-year downtrend. It's very beaten down for a variety of reasons that we don't need to get into. And in a beaten down stock, in this case a $6 stock with that much of an ATR, it didn't make our list. But if it was on my list, I would then look at what it's been doing over the past few months. You know, is it an uptrend? Is it a downtrend? And then what has it done in the week or 2 weeks coming to earnings to see how people are positioned? And again, tradingworkshop.com, spent 30 minutes going over this in a lot more detail. But in this particular case, if we look at it, MNK, last quarter it had bad news. You can see the big down move on the left side of the chart there. It never bounced. So this is something that people do not want to be long this stock. Gaps down last quarter, sideways, trends down into earnings. You can see moves sideways into earnings. This chart that I grabbed actually since it reported a few days ago, you can see the day that he says it traded down all day. It did, and now it started to bounce a little bit the last day or so. If we zoomed in on the day that the earnings happened, the day that you sent me the tweet that it went down, here's the chart. This is what it looks like. Coming into earnings, there was a little support at 650. There was some more support at 6.25. It was gapping up. So people did, they did gap it higher in the pre-market based on those headlines, which probably caught your attention as well. MNK beats earnings. But what you need to think about, and again, this is one where even if I didn't know they weren't spinning off their unit and it was gapping higher, and it traded below both of those supports, the 650 and 6.25 on the open, your focus would be short, right? If I knew in this case that if I'd done the research and knew that they couldn't sell their unit because nobody was interested or they couldn't get a price, that's not good. If they're trying to sell one of their strategic assets to raise money and they can't do that, when its stock's gapping higher, the first thing I'm going to look at is, does it fail at the recent resistance on the left side of the chart 7, and right on the open, if it's below 7, I'm going to short it right away and then see what happens as support. And if it drops support, both support levels, continue to focus on the short. One of the rules that we have on our desk with the morning game plan is in those morning game plan sheets that you've seen many times, when I give you the multiple resistance and the multiple support, if something right on the open slices right through both supports or both resistance, then we'll look for it to continue to trend. Oh, and by the way, my pinned tweet covers this topic. So if you just go to my Twitter and my pinned tweet, I give a breakdown in detail on this blog post of basically how to form a detailed game plan and how to trade something intraday that has a catalyst. So that's there for you as well. So how I evaluate an idea, right? Is there a catalyst? Yes, MNK added a catalyst. Was there pre-market volume? Check number 2. How has the stock performed in the higher time frame? We've talked about MNK, multi-year downtrend. Last quarter, gap down on earnings, moving sideways, then trending down into earnings as well. So people are just selling the stock, and that is that. So I want to give you another example of a stock that had a catalyst that had a similar longer-term downtrend to MNK, but behaved differently. The catalyst was yesterday. So here's WW, longer-term chart, trending down. This was a $70 stock, trended all the way down to 20, or actually 15. Bottomed a few months ago. Showed a little bit of strength before earnings and then failed, and then it come down into earnings. So here's a markup of the WW chart that was gapping higher in the pre-market. I've labeled our resistance levels. I've labeled our support levels. Right on the open, S1 held pretty much. Actually, I think it opened a little bit below S1 and then ripped to the upside, but blew through R1 and R2. So basic rule, first 15 minutes, if something slices through both supports or both resistance, we look for that to trend. And in this case, this is a beaten down stock that actually had good numbers as well, but buyers stepped in right on the open, and that determined the trend for the day. So that's in a nutshell. 80% of the time, if you can identify something that has a good catalyst, if you do the analysis that I outline in tradingworkshop.com, in the blog post as well that I just showed you, my pinned tweet on Twitter, if you go through that process, understanding the minutiae of the catalyst won't necessarily matter, but I can think every week there's 2, 3, 4, 5 names where it does the minutiae matters. EXAS is the most recent example where it was below our support levels last week or the week before at 105 down to 102, 101, but I was still buying it, closed at 120 or 118 or something like that. But for the majority, yes, understanding, identifying a catalyst, pre-market relative volume, you can go as long as you understand the process of identifying the key support and resistance levels. That is going to cover you from an intraday perspective. Hope that helped.